welcome everybody again for another great RumbleUp webinar. This is something we've been doing, sort of lunchtime chats, just to get, just to highlight the great work a lot of our clients are doing, and to provide valuable information to the clients watching, or people who may not be clients who maybe want to pick something up. So today we have the New York RACC with us. So this is a Republican committee out of New York. They're going to talk about some of the ways they've used texting successfully, specifically I assume it's a blue state, in a non-friendly Republican state. Some of you may be in Republican-friendly states, and you have other problems to deal with, but in this case, we're going to be highlighting a lot of the ways they've used texting to reach various groups that may not be traditionally thought as Republican potential voters, but they were able to reach them and talk to them about Republican causes. So we're going to look into that. But I also just want to highlight, our great partnership, RumbleUp's great partnership with the Republican State Leadership Committee. So we work with, I personally, on the client experience team, work with down ballot campaigns all over the country, and state committees on their texting strategies, and how they can really take advantage of the partnership we have with the RSLC through our GOP Activate platform, which is powered by RumbleUp, which allows these campaigns, committees to have pretty easy access to what I think is a great platform to reach voters. Okay, so we have Scott Jordan and Nick Wilock with New York RACC. So if you both want to introduce yourselves, we'll get started there.
I'll lead off. Good afternoon. Yeah, Scott Jordan. I've worked for, we call it RACC here in New York, Republican Assembly Campaign Committee. We are the political arm of the Republican Assembly Conference here in New York State. I run a Western New York and somewhat upstate region when it comes to our volunteer time elections. Nick, if you want to give your real quick.
I have a little bit of an overlapping role with Scott, but a little bit different. I run on the government side of the state legislature and the state assembly. What we do, I run our press office. So I have a team of about a dozen press secretaries that I work with directly. They're responsible for all mass communication for the 48 and growing members of our conference. And text messaging is a big part of that. Not just political. We utilize text messaging on the legislative side as well for different things that we're trying to do. So we work with our team here on the mass communication for text messaging. It's a great role, and I'm able to, as Scott said, the way that we operate here in New York is in both houses of the legislature is that we are fortunate to be able to volunteer our time on campaigns for our members and candidates. Like I said, each conference has that here. So on the volunteer side, similar to Scott, I oversee a handful of races in upstate New York as well. And text messaging has been, and I'll speak for Scott on this one too, text messaging has been a fascinating learning experience for us over the last 6 years or so. And very fortunate to partner up with RumbleUp to be able to help us in some key moments get our messages out when the time really matters. So.
And, I mentioned our partnership with the RSLC, Republican State Leadership Committee, that works with committees and down ballot campaigns. What has been something you've enjoyed about our partnership with the RSLC?
I'll start and I'll turn it over to Nick. I mean, the RSLC has been an incredible partner for us, both investing in RACC and really offering us advice, especially for Nick and I. We each have our own responsibilities with campaigns throughout the cycle, but between the two of us, we handle just about all the texting from our organization throughout the entire state. So that includes Long Island, and increasingly we're having more and more success in New York City as well. but a lot of that success probably wouldn't be possible without first our Republican leader is very forward thinking. He allows us to do a lot of different things. He allows Nick and I to fail sometimes when we send text messages because we're trying to be creative and we're trying to do different things. And I think that's ultimately led to a lot of our successes. And the leader is very involved with the RSLC and a partner with them. And they've been a huge, huge help and helped us partner with RumbleUp to more efficiently send our text messages and better targeting and modeling as well. Nick, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I agree. The relationship has been incredible. To Scott's point, that we're able to try and fail a lot. You know, thankfully more successful than not, but there are those fails, and I think it's because of our you know, the Scott and I always trying to find different and unique ways to get to a particular voter. And it's not just, and to be clear, it's not just, and I think this is where the RLSC really sees, you know, the value of our work, is it's not just about, you know, a couple of days before early voting begins or a couple of days before election day, like, oh, hey, make sure you go out and vote for so-and-so. It's not just about that. There's a multitude of different ways that we're trying to get a message out. Scott's really good at surveys, you know, sending out targeted surveys and then trying to capture that information back in terms of who that actual voter was. And then, okay, so you've got some responses from a voter. How are you going to actualize that into something beneficial down the road, whether it's a vote or asking for money, whatever the case may be? We do things like that. We love sending out video, embedding campaign commercials in our text messages, something that I'm a big fan of, because text messaging is not just about, you know, a one-off of sending out, hey, you know, give me money, or you know, hey, this is my legislative platform. Can I count on your vote? Text messaging is really no different than any other. It's about building up a narrative and building up a comfort level, a relationship with somebody, because you are literally entering their in many cases their personal phone. That's, you know, you're building up a different type of relationship than you are just seeing, you know, than a voter seeing a campaign commercial on a TV or being in your mailbox. So it's building up that relationship. I love doing, you know, when we launch a candidate, when they're announcing that they're running for state assembly, I love doing what we call these launch videos. They're longer documentary style videos that really introduce the candidate in a relatable and emotion and a human way. It's not just, you know, oh, I'm Bob Smith, I'm for lower taxes and jobs and less regulation. That is a buzzkill. You know, it's introducing the candidate in a relatable and emotional way. And and it's not just taking that video and putting it up on social media anymore. We're actually sending it out in a text message and getting it out to tens of if not, you know, tens of thousands of voters that can actualize into a vote. But it's about starting that conversation. It's getting them comfortable with the voter. And we'll go back a couple of more times in these races between now and November with other forms of content, whatever that may be. And then, yeah, then you go in for the close in late October and ask for their vote. But I think that's what we really appreciate, is the different ways of how we text message, what we're text messaging. It's never just, you know, the same thing. It's never just a block of text. It's never just a graphic. We really try and mix it up. And I think that, Scott, has been one of the more beneficial things, is that it's different content each time we're sending stuff out.
Yeah, and I think just to highlight something that stood out to me is just have a strategy, like right off the bat. I think a lot of people, they may view texting as like a emergency. Okay, we have 12 hours to spend the remaining of our budget, so let's just tell people to go vote. But just like mail, just like anything else, you should and can have a strategy. I know most mail programs that are ran well, they have a first mailer that has like an introduction, maybe one or two others, but they're kind of building on each other up to election day. So the same principles apply in text. And I think another thing you said is just be memorable, right? It's just like again, like most mail ends up in the trash, and a lot of times nowadays we live in a world where attention is trying to be grabbed at all times. Maybe they're watching Tucker Carlson while they're looking at their phone. They get the text. If it's just a big blob of text, like see you later, like you don't stand in their brain. But using the enhanced videos, like you mentioned, that we can compress for clients really does make a difference.
Yeah, and that's been a big part with us too, and I say this on like the government side of what we do too, with all of the mail we do there, but also on the campaign side, whether it's mail, TV, texting, it almost runs, counterproductive to what you're trying to accomplish. But I always say that the best political content, whether it's a text message, a television ad, a mail piece, doesn't look political. It almost stands out. It just looks different. I did a mailer a few years back, and the front of it, we put it in a text message too. We translated it into a text message, and on the front, I'll see if I can dig it out. On the front of it, we had, was the catchphrase like, some things have a way of always, some things have a way of coming back in style. And it was a disco guy from the 1970s in full disco attire. That was the front of the mailer. That was the image on the text message. That was it. And, we got very, very good response out of it, just because it looks and sounds different than anything else that's out there. Otherwise, Dercy, to your point, it's going to end up in the trash can, or someone's going to look at it real quick and just hit delete or close up their text message.
And I think what we've had a lot of success, at least I've found, some of our most successful texts that we've sent out that have had the most engagement with the potential voters are both surveys where we're asking people their opinions, and we've then used that information to develop donor lists, to better target those voters, as we then know here's a subset of the issues that are important to these people. But also, as we talked about the videos, using not only just our campaign videos, but including pulling down video from a newscast that's favorable to us, and sending out that 4 or 5 second snippet that sends the message that we want to send, but it's a third party making it for us. And I've always found, especially with these texts, is that if we can send that, get that message out, that's where we get the most engagement back, because people have, their BS detectors go up a lot when I say things about what my candidate is. But when I can get the trusted news anchor saying it, and then putting that right into their phone and dropping it in there in a 15-second, easy to digest format, the interaction and the text backs have been, sometimes we get 10% of the people that we text will actually engage with us, and mostly in a favorable. There's always a unfavorable response to when you text, and you just need to take that with a grain of salt and enjoy the humor of it sometimes. But for the most part, it's a very favorable response if you're sending people the right messages.
And just moving on, I think this just ties into strategy. Obviously, New York is not the most Republican friendly. What are some ways you've used texting to reach sort of non-traditional audiences? Traditional in the sense of like, what would you normally thought of as a Republican voter? What are some ways you use texting? I know a couple of weeks ago you did like a Mandarin text. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
We were able to, so we had a special election in a New York City district that traditionally is not one that's favorable for us. And we were able to put together a text message using RumbleUp and targeting who we believed voters that identified that were Asian and Chinese, which was a large portion of the district in Mandarin, to engage them in the language they're most comfortable speaking. We didn't ultimately win the election, but it was an interesting and a good use of our ability to reach out. Nick, do you have any other?
Yeah, I would say, again, it's that it comes back to the partnership with the RLSC about, investing in data. Data has been that is the single most important thing I think we have at our fingertips is good data. And our leader in this conference have invested in data over the last couple of years. It's been tremendous. So, it allows us to, just like on mail and other digital forms of targeting, and text messaging is no different. It allows us to have a very tailored message to our, our more high propensity hard GOP audience compared to a high propensity swing audience. And actually right now, and I'm looking over my laptop, I just about an hour ago, I sent out a text message to a high propensity swing audience in two of our assembly districts that we're going to be actively campaigning and helping candidates out there this fall. But I'm soliciting that group of voters to participate in a focus group that we're conducting in another 3 weeks. So, that I'm advertising, a free $75 gift card. That's the attention grabber. So we're using, and the reason we're going after swing voters is, I think many of us on this call would agree that, obviously it's important, Dercy, to your point about, yes, let's get the hard Republicans. Let's make sure high propensity, mid, high, low propensity, get all those Republicans out. But a lot of our elections, I think, are going to be won and lost in that high propensity swing bucket. So for purposes of this focus group, that's who we're targeting, trying to solicit to participate. So then we can, take our messaging from there for the duration of the campaign. That starts with data, having this data available to us. That starts with a partnership with the RLSC, with our leader in our conference. And, we're very, very fortunate to have that.
And I think, it's important to know that our success stories, in 2022, it was a year that I think nationally, going to the polls, everybody thought there was going to be this red wave that carried a lot of Republicans across the line. And nationally, it didn't necessarily take place, but by us planning and using both the modeling data that we put together with our partnership with the RSLC and mail and TV, and specifically texting to voters in swing districts and swing voters, the Republican Assembly Campaign Committee was able to flip 6 seats that were previously held by Democrats and move them over to our side of the aisle. I think we were one of the only caucuses in the state or the country that really had that kind of success story, and especially considering we are in such a deep blue state. I mean, New York is not favorable to us oftentimes, but we feel like the targeting we were able to do by making sure that we were sending messages directly into the pockets of the people that were modeled as swing voters, and not hoping that they're the ones that necessarily got the mail that day, or that they were the ones that were watching the shows we think they were watching. We were able to mail or deliver it directly into their pockets, and we believe that it played a large role in our success story when combined with our entire plans.
And so looking forward, you mentioned your leadership really likes texting. I'm sure your members enjoy you texting on their behalf. Where do you see, like, what kind of impact do you think texting is going to have this particular election in 2024?
Well, go ahead, Scott.
No, I'll let you. You can start, Nick. I mean, I was just going to say, it's becoming increasingly better through partnerships like either through GOP Data Center or phone numbers becoming easier to find. The mobile numbers. I mean, the biggest obstacles that I've always run into in texting is you're fighting to find the correct phone numbers so that you can engage those actual voters that you're trying to talk to, and obviously opt-outs. You want to be careful not to have too many people opting out, so now they're no longer getting your message. The number of phone numbers that are available to us and the way in which they're tagged have made it so much easier to actually contact Nick Wilock when I know I want to talk to Nick Wilock and get my message to him. So I think that we at RACC will be texting. We'll be breaking records the number of texts we've sent in the past 3 cycles. Nick, with that, I'll turn it to you. Where do you see it going?
Yeah, opt out is a concern for me. You know, and Scott and I were talking about this earlier, opt-outs, you know, when we're using the, you know, same account, we're pulling our numbers from, you know, the same source that we have been, and those opt-out numbers continue to creep up. That's a shrinking audience generally. I mean, you're always going to have new voters that move into districts and move around the state or in and out of the state, whatever the case may be. But you've got a shrinking pool, slowly shrinking pool of voters that you're able to talk to. So that's why I think placing a greater emphasis on two things is important. One, it's the creative that backs up and supports the text message, whether it's video, whether it's a GIF, whether it's a graphic, whatever the case is, it needs to be highly creative and highly engaging. The second part is, you know, there are some who, you know, would say, well, we don't want to start too early. We don't want to start until, you know, October. We don't have the money to start until October. And the thing about our organization is that they have bought into the fact that we cannot wait until October or even September to start these things anymore. You know, we are going to start our you know, our texting campaigns or texting budgets plan similar to a mail budget or TV budget a buy. They could start as early as June, because again, you have to start that conversation early, because if you just wait and you have this onslaught of six text messages you want to send out in 5 weeks before election day, they are going to be more likely to opt out at that point. You're not going to have built up that relationship with them at that point. And starting earlier is better, but just to Scott's point earlier, it's just planning ahead, methodically planning out how you want to, what message you want, what creative medium you're going to use. Earlier is better. That's probably my number one, you know, takeaway from this too, is don't wait until the last minute. Don't wait until October. Don't even wait until September. You have to start that conversation early, because with just the onslaught of text messages and mail and TV, radio in a presidential year, it is going to be complete white noise in October. And I'm even very hesitant about spending a whole lot of money in October. I mean, you have to do your main thing. You have to get out your base. You have to do some fundamental things. But to spend a majority of your budget in October on anything, I think is going to be a mistake this year.
Yeah. So you heard it. You heard them, everybody. Vote often, text often, hopefully with us. Okay. So while we have a few minutes left, you know, we greatly appreciate, you know, the work you've done with New York RACC to help down-ballot candidates in New York through the partnership with the Republican State Leadership Committee. What would you say are some of the main reasons, though, you've kind of stuck with RumbleUp cycle after cycle?
One of our biggest concerns is always deliverability. We have used, when Nick and I started looking into texting for our conference back in 2018, we did use a different service, and we found that our deliverability rates were very, very low. We kept getting spam filtered out. You're still spending the money there, and you're not getting any of the benefit of. So I've found that RumbleUp, through their partnerships with the carriers, have been able to do a good job of getting that through. And additionally, I will say RumbleUp was able, when we do have TCR campaigns that we've set up so that we're sending out verified texts. But in the rare instance where we haven't been able to, RumbleUp is able to still send out at a small fee that gets passed on to the carriers, is my understanding, non-verified text messages as well that still do land. So that's been extremely helpful and something that I value.
Yeah, I'd echo that. Same exact thing. Verified numbers are key. I think the customer service has been, I was not hired for my tech skills. I was not hired for math, anything like that, certainly. But I think the customer service, when we run into issues on our end, has been rapid, the response has been rapid, been very helpful. And I think the other thing, just briefly, we're running in New York, we're running into a situation this year where for the first time ever, statewide candidates, state assembly, state senate are going to have access to matching funds, matching dollars. And the short of it is that, you know, we need to have our members and candidates, they need to be able to pay for these text messages directly rather than the conference. They're going to amass a great deal of money through these matching funds. And RumbleUp, you guys have been very responsive in terms of like, okay, here's the situation we're facing here in New York. These are clients, the members, the candidates. We need to be able to execute, you know, text messages for them in 2024 in this way. Can you work with us to make that happen? And you guys have. We're working on it right now. We're very appreciative of it. That makes Scott's and my job a lot easier. And it's going to greatly help our candidates. So I think that's another thing too, is you guys are always willing to listen to us in terms of, you know, how to make improve the platform experience. Reports was a big thing for me, being able to get reports promptly over to candidates and members to do their own follow-up with people who responded, and always willing to listen to ideas on, you know, based on some of our needs here, again, specifically in New York.
Cool. Well, thank you both so much. We're going to roll into a Q&A. So we have a couple of questions. Everybody, if you have not submitted a question, please do. I'm going to be just doing Q&A here for the next 5-10 minutes. Okay, so the first question, when would you encourage interactions like texting back and forth, you know, conversations? And have you been able to scale that with talented responses, maybe AI, great volunteers, etc.? So I'm going to chime in on this one first. So yes, I personally think people should be responding basically as much as possible. And there's a couple reasons why. So with RumbleUp, particularly, we make it super easy to scale this up. So it's very easy to go to your conversation screen and just see all of the responses and just bang them out. And a lot of the time, the majority of those responses will be opt-outs. So once you filter the opt-outs out, you're left with who might be worth responding to. And then what we can do on our end is we can create pre-made responses. Well, you create them on your end, but the platform allows you to create pre-made responses. So you can even like have sort of a library of like, you know, most common things. So when I've ran campaigns myself, you know, I'm usually thinking about what's the niche topic in the district, and what, maybe it's the airport funding, maybe it's whatever. This is something you probably want to have an answer to because it could be the make or break for your candidate, especially at the local level. Maybe abortion is a big thing in your state. You probably want to have a copy paste response for this to avoid any discrepancies, problems, screenshots that can happen that'll end up in a newspaper and make you look very bad. So we, like I said, have the ability to create these sort of pre-made responses that all you got to do is tap a button, it populates the text box, and you shoot it off, while also being able to tag that contact with whatever you want. So if I just mentioned abortion, you could tag them as a abortion voter for later on future more targeted follow-ups. Regarding scalability, we make it super easy to have volunteers come on the platform. They can create texture accounts. These accounts don't see your billing. They don't see anything like that. They just see whatever project is made live. And you can even go further and create texting teams and assign those teams to specific projects. So yeah, in regards to the question, I think, yeah, we at RumbleUp make it easy to scale. And I also encourage always responding to people as much as possible. So Nick and Scott.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it. I'll keep it quick so that we can get to some more questions. But I agree with everything Dercy said. Us being in New York, we don't generally have the luxury of just going after those hard Republicans with many of our messages. If we're going to win seats, we need to be talking to swing voters and encouraging. And anytime I can get more data points on those swing voters, you know, in New York, we have we're one of the destinations that migrants are coming, being shipped from southern states up to make a point. And it's become a hot button issue for us in a lot. So if I'm sending out a text on that, I will always at the very least ask at the end, reply no if you want to see us fight this, or do you agree? Let me know so that I can continue to grow with those swing voters and know, okay, who are with me, because the last thing in the world I want to be doing when it's election day is reminding people that have told me through my messages, no, I'm not with you. I don't want to be reminding them to go vote. That's someone else's job. So I believe in always trying to get some sort of response from them to allow for communication, and to allow, we'll sometimes, I know this is something that Nick does, is have our candidates pick up the phone. I mean, a lot of times there isn't a request from the texter, they have a real question about the campaign, and we'll pull that number down and send our candidate, call this person, turn them into a favorable voter, and that's oftentimes all it takes. So I definitely would always be asking for a question and have a conversation.
Exactly. So there's two questions here that are kind of similar. I'll pair them together. Do you have any, I mean, we kind of talked about this during the actual webinar. Do you have any examples of some tactics you used with texting to reach people in blue states like yourself, to move moderates kind of away from voting Dem? And when you did this, what were some things you were trying to measure to prove that it was working? I guess targeting moderates is the question.
Yeah, I'll go. I'll give you, and it's a very timely example based on what I mentioned earlier that I'm doing, trying to solicit people for a focus group. I mean, these are people that are they may not necessarily, I mean, they're moderates by, I guess, definition, because they're high propensity swing voters. They've been modeled as a swing voter for a reason. So when we conduct this focus group, we're going to obviously ask a series of questions about, everything from where do they consume their, news from, how many hours a day or a week do they spend on social media, get into some of the political issues, get into abortion, show them, a campaign commercial or a mailer and see what their reaction is to it. But the purpose of asking all these questions is you get all this verbatim out of them from these moderate voters who, and by the way, in both of these, in the community, the two different communities that we're conducting this in, they are, they're not red communities, they're purple or blue. And so, but it's getting this verbatim, and it's about, what we're going to do with that in terms of then going to poll with it. But we're going to use that same messaging in the text messaging from these moderate swing voters in purple or blue towns. We're going to just use those same words and the same issues that came out of this focus group, and we're just going to deploy it into text messaging. And I think that's one thing I can point to that's been effective, and the one thing that sticks out from the last focus group we did, that we had it in a ton of our text messaging from 2 years ago. Here in New York, one party rules everything, and governor's office, Senate, and Assembly, and people kept saying the same thing over and over again. It's just one party rule is enough. One party rule has to stop. We deployed that in a lot of our messaging, and Scott and I can point to countless examples, not only in the seats that we flipped, the 6 seats that we flipped, but in other races where we may have fallen short. We greatly we cut the narrow of defeat, the margin of defeat down significantly just by deploying some of the messaging. But I would say it really is local specific. It may not, may not be able to go in with this broad message to try and target moderates in purple or blue towns. You really got to have someone who understands the politics of that area, because they could be different out in Buffalo, where Scott is, compared to Utica, compared to here in Albany. So that's really important. Is understanding the local flavor and then how to deploy it responsibly.
That was the last question. If your question wasn't answered, everybody, I did drop in the chat our client experience email. So again, if your question wasn't answered, or if you have any other questions that may come up, any points, please reach out to cex@rumbleup.com, and we will reach back out to you. Any final comments, Nick or Scott?
Excuse me. I think, Nick, one thing that he mentioned right there at the end was our ability to use, when you are talking to voters, you do send to see especially with those swing voters, certain trends coming back that you don't get with a TV commercial, you don't get with a mail piece. And you can start seeing, wow, I'm hearing this same phrase over and over again. Let's integrate that into some of our messaging. So it's that two-way communication and the ability to directly contact the people that we know we want to talk to are two of my favorite things for text messaging. So we're thrilled to have this partnership. We're thrilled to partner, and we're thankful.
Cool. Nick, anything?
Text early, and text often. And don't be afraid to try something ridiculous. Scott and I have been the recipients of phone calls being like, "Are you guys really want to send this out?" And it's a little, very, very creative. It's very different, but don't be afraid to try stuff that's different, that's creative. That's the stuff that works. Don't be afraid to fail. You don't know until you try. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna fail, texting is one of the cheaper ways to fail in political world. So try to experiment as much as possible. You're gonna keep learning.
Right.
So, all right. Thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate your time. Again, we do these things basically monthly. If you do want to see a topic that maybe we haven't done yet, again, please email cex@rumbleup.com for our client experience team, and we will try to get you a client to talk about, that topic, to hopefully keep on teaching people how to use texting effectively, whether it be political, fundraising, advocacy, whatever. We have clients that use texting in all kinds of ways. So thank you again, Nick and Scott, and hope you have a good day, everybody.